my world actually started with technology. I've been very good with math, and I also liked, but I'm also a people's person, so perhaps I'm able to kind of balance out both sides. So I started my stint with telecommunication. I worked at a large corporate company, and I worked in designing, I would say, designing fields or making sure to improve the bandwidth and capacity of internet structures, to keep it very simple. For example, a Formula One race in the US, or improving the connectivity of a building inside. So, I mean, I don't know, for some reason, the corporate never really stuck to me. And, I do TEDx. I've been a TEDx organizer for the last 6 or 7 years. So perhaps I had a different calling. I was also really interested in kind of reviving different arts and cultures. I like, I like putting myself out there. I'm somebody who's very curious. So, for example, I love learning about new cultures. I love traveling. I really hope that comes back. Then I moved my career to working for a sustainability company. We worked on making paper toys and kind of inside creativity. It's sort of, we were basically IKEA with paper, and we sold our products in museums, in the Harvard Museum, in MoMA. We're still trying to, I think, move to more European and Australian and New Zealand cultures. And then I think I'm now at a point where I'm able to do something that is socially relevant, or perhaps it solves a social issue, and also applying my technology skills. So now I would say I am a project-based consultant that's worked on issues like internet accessibility, internet shutdowns. I've also consulted for Gapminder, the Roslings, who are based out of Sweden. And I'm currently working on a project that is using technology. We're not using bleeding edge AI, but we're using sort of AI to train our systems to be able to detect multilingual hate speech. And we're also looking at improving tools that are available for communities that can work together virtually, because that's something that we need. A lot of tools are, I would say, agreeable to a certain bandwidth and to a certain internet, but we're kind of like trying to understand what are the needs of the users so they can assess their communities better. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, but I'm also a community builder. So I'm also a global shaper with the World Economic Forum. I run a project around sustainable fashion. During the COVID time, we also worked on employing textile workers, because in India and in the global South, not just India, we have Bangladesh, we have India and Sri Lanka, who are at the center of all the production. And we had a massive halt in the supply chain. So all the orders were canceled, and we also had a lot of migrant workers who were involved. And so there was a lot of displacement, a lot of chaos. We were able to do a project where we employed women who made masks, and we also sold them masks were always like the need of the hour. So I work on a sustainable fashion project. I've done a fellowship with the Do School in Berlin. I'm sure Nikki would have heard of that, where we kind of partnered with the UN, and we helped a few entrepreneurs get more learning or get resources on how they can build their business. So yes, that's a little bit about me.
Okay. There are so many things where I'm like, oh, that's exciting. I want to hear more about working with the Roslings, the Gapminders. And I'm also curious. One thing that I'm actually curious about is to see your perspective on the role of continents. It feels like the next 5 years belong to China because there's so much that's happening over there. But then my best guess would be that India is next in line, because I see more and more people going back home because India has become a place where all these brain power that's been distributed in the world finds their challenges that they enjoy solving back at home. So is there such a thing as returning brains to the continent, which means that there is a global brain drain of Indians who missing? When you go to Silicon Valley, most of the leaders, or a lot of the leaders, are Indian people. And whenever I talk to them, they're very proud of their country. They're very strong. They're very strongly connected to their country. And it always felt for me like they are where they are because in their country there is no calling for them. But now it seems to be Mumbai is turning from a, I don't know, 1-star city to a 5-star city, where it's all like from terrible and rotten to luxury. Um, I don't know. I don't want to continue, but I'm curious what you think about that momentum.
That momentum has always sort of been there. We're really, I would say, um, I think we have a lot of grit and we have a lot of perseverance. We're very hardworking, because India is a different country. It's a different context. So even if you look at brands that are being introduced, they have to be culturally acceptable, and there has to be a localized weaving. And I think even when you look at all the behavioral or the market consumers, I think they do take a little bit longer when it comes to understanding how we respond to things. But it's also, we're 1.3 billion people, so we are the best market to really test an idea and ideate and see whether it will work or not. So that really helps. So even if you have a fraction of that population that responds to your product, it's pretty successful, right? So I think perhaps I would like to say that we have a league of our own when it comes to things. We do work in a certain way, and yes, we're doing really well, and perhaps we also see the massive brain, I would say, reversal, or rather the talent going back is perhaps also because of the issues with the visa. And when you have the best developers, or you have really technically sound people who don't have to move out of their geography, they can live in the comfort of their own homes. uh, there are a lot of them who don't see a reason to really go out, right? There's no reason, so many of them stay back. We're definitely not in contention with China. In fact, we have a lot of geopolitical tensions for a while now. But yes, there are a lot of sectors where we are there, and I think we will continue to migrate. There are just so many of us. Um, yeah, I mean, I think it's really perspective, and I think I have a very interesting reason. So I'm in this space where once I graduated out of college, there would be I labeled it down to three reasons why a lot of us migrate. I think one of them is because we want to get away from our parents. I mean, that's perhaps the number one reason. The second one is to evade partnerships, right? You don't want to really stay on there. And the third is, of course, the purchase parity. I mean, earning in a euros or a USD is a lot more beneficial than perhaps getting a salary here. So I think those are the three reasons that I found it. Of course, that it's something that I've taken it with a very light-hearted manner. But then, yeah, that's perhaps one of the few reasons where we used to think, okay, fine, we graduate and why people go. And of course, masters is one, but then a lot of it is to kind of stay away and get a change. And it's good. I think people find yourselves, but then there's also, in the context that's there's not a lot of focus. I mean, of course, it might be there wasn't a lot of focus on yourself and looking inwards. Yes, we do have the rights, and we own the rights to yoga and a lot of other meditation tactics, but then I don't think a lot of us really apply it to ourselves to find ourselves. So it's great that there are a lot of people who have the opportunity and chance to do it.
Can you share
And
a
yes,
little about your work with the Roslings? I know that Hans Rosling's life mission was to unfuck misinterpreted statistics.
Yeah.
Always felt like whenever people were talking about statistics, he was there to put them right and said, this is not how you look at it.
yeah.
Share a little about your work with the Gapminder.
So some of the work that I did do is actually some of it has been stopped because of the pandemic. I used to work a lot on getting more representation for Dollar Street because where everyone, you can imagine the whole world as a straight line, and you have people on the left who are poor and the right and the rich, and everybody's in between.
And
And the
that's,
reality
the term is called Dollar Street, and it's a
that's
talk
all
that
about
Anna
it.
Rosling gave at TED.
Absolutely. So it's basically the street where you have people earning in dollars, and the metric for it is different because it depends on the items you have at home and the way your items look. So it was more of a research, more of a photographic comparison of how things look, and then based on that they calculate what is the income level and where you will fall on Dollar Street. So actually, surprisingly, most of us are in between, and the people who do get it wrong and who are actually on the right and closer towards being rich, are the people, they are the Europeans mostly, unfortunately. And I have, through the travels of mine, done work for them in terms of, getting them the right homes. And we have a certain metric that we need people at this particular level. So it depends on whether you have a car or whether you have a stove at home. So we have different levels, L1 to L4, and I help them get homes in Austria. I put Austria on the map for the first time. I helped them get, of course, homes in India. I completed Sri Lanka and a couple of homes in the US. Yes, and we really hope it does continue. We were actually supposed to finish the whole of Middle East last year. And we were also supposed to present at the Expo 2020 happening in Dubai. And I'm also helping them localize Factfulness into as many languages possible in the Asia Pacific region and in the African region. So that's still on the way. But it was really interesting because I think for me, I've always enjoyed doing fieldwork. I think maybe one broad way to put it, with the work that I do, I love working with communities and I like testing my ideas. So I really enjoyed the field work that I've had to do so far. A lot of people, and the way, with the way the research is designed is something that has caught everyone's fancy. So yeah, I've had a great experience so far.
You said that you prepared some questions.
I didn't prepare any questions. I was more of, I mean, of course, I do prepare questions to make people feel comfortable, but then some of the questions have always been about, whether you had more money and whether you're happy with the money that you have. Is there something that you miss in life? And, it's basically, again, all of them lead to calculating the income of the people in general. And of course, the best part is I always take a gift for the families. So that always helps as well.
I meant for us here, you prepare questions. You said you have questions on your phone for
Yes,
now.
yes, I do. Yes, no, I do. No, but I just wanted to kind of understand from everyone. Has everyone seen Social Dilemma, and what are your thoughts about deplatforming people and big tech and regulation and governance? I think that's something all of us could relate to. I just wanted to hear everyone's thoughts about it, and then I'll jump in.
Okay. So
Nikki, we'll start with you and then we'll move on with everyone else.
Let me start. So the data mining engines are at the same time a gift and a weapon to the world, because they have the potential to identify the world's biggest problems and solve them. But in greedy hands, they turn into a weapon because they can be easily used to manipulate. And I always sense both is happening, but one is louder than the other. So Social Dilemma is and Netflix is good about that, to display, and they did it already with The Great Hack, kind of to make the bad part loud and amplify it. And I think everyone should be aware of it. It's like eating meat. You should be aware how the cow from the farm to the industrial meat production, like the whole journey, you should be aware of it. And then you make your own decisions if you still eat meat. So it's good to have an overview and a broader understanding of what's the potential abuse with data and how much is actually happening on it. I'm consciously naive. This is a decision I've made to survive, that more people have good interest than bad interest. More people in the world want to understand how they can identify problems and solve them than people in the world who want to understand how can I take as much information about you as possible to manipulate your decision-making process. That's my personal take. I think that informing people doesn't change their behavior, only pain changes your behavior, right? Informing people about food doesn't change your behavior about eating food. We still eat meat. That's why all the alternative meats look like meat and try to taste like meat. So we don't have to make an active decision to change our behavior. We do the same thing as before. We're just doing good without knowing we're doing good, right? So we don't change our behavior, it doesn't hurt. Same with our data, it doesn't hurt, right? We don't have it doesn't touch our skin what happens with the information we provide freely, and that's why we keep on providing information for free to all of the providers, right? To the Facebooks and to the TikToks and to the Clubhouse. And I'm sure that Clubhouse also understands well how to mine information about the users and how to, I'm sure there are AIs that are recording and evaluating every single room at Clubhouse to figure out what are the people talking about and what is this going to deliver. And all of this is going to deliver a lot of information how we can solve our problems. And all of this is going to delivering a lot of information on how we can manipulate the population. So that's my personal take. As I said, I'm consciously naive. I want to look at the good things, and I'm sure that I'm positive that there are more good things than bad things. It's just we're just learned to amplify the bad things, right? I've stopped reading the news for 8 years now, and I don't think that I'm missing out anything. I haven't had a newspaper in my hands for 8 years. Well, it's wrong. I took it to lit the open fire at my chimney. So that's me. I don't know. Who wants to take it from here? Or what do you think about Raashi? What do you think about what I'm saying?
I do agree with some aspects of it. Some aspects actually don't apply to India. Like, for example, we banned TikTok because of our geopolitical situation, and most of my country actually doesn't eat a lot of beef. I mean, although some of them do and some of them don't. But yeah, I mean, yeah, there are some aspects to what you're saying that makes sense. And of course, there are some aspects where I do feel that we are intentionally kept in the dark, because if you had to tell someone, or perhaps, if there are also ways. I mean, I also teach digital literacy to people. There are also ways to actually expose how that data is doing to you. But at the end of the day, it's a trade-off, because we have conscious choices. Like, for example, I can say, and I can put my hand up and say that I'm very guilty. I still use them. I know exactly what they're doing, and I still use them, because for me, it's the best way to keep in touch. I have so many friends across the world, and I miss them so much. And I like knowing about what they're up to, so that I can keep in touch with them, and, wishing people on their birthdays and so on and so forth. I do believe that there will be a lot of alternate platforms that don't deprive, or that would not need the kind of data that we need, and all of, the digital dictatorship, I hope, ends sometime soon. But I do believe that there are going to be a lot of alternate and local platforms.
Niall.
Yeah, I mean, I'm similar in many ways to Nikki. I'm sort of more of an optimist and have a positive view on these things. There are different dimensions. There's the privacy dimension, which is a bit of a concern, and I think at the end of the day, it's the corporates and private enterprise that are taking an increasing lead on this and being more ethical in the approach too. And I suppose what I see and hope in particular is that the sort of bigger purpose will cascade more quickly and more effectively into corporate strategies and the corporate sentiment and the DNA of organizations. And I think this pandemic has probably started to highlight that and perhaps accelerated a bit more. So I think my personal view on the privacy side, I just think that organizations will take more of a lead on this and be and play a more positive role in the ethics around that. I can't see that being driven by governments. I don't think there'll be a sort of global governmental collaboration on this. It doesn't seem possible at the moment. So it has to be through individuals and organizations probably have far more impact on that, other than maybe influencers who have enormous followings that can maybe drive some of these agendas too. So yeah, just
that's a very practical answer, actually, Nal. It's a very practical and optimistic answer. Thank you for that. Marcus, do you want to go next?
Well, I'm a bit like Niall, but I'd like to focus specifically on just a few things. I mean, so we have just entered the final stages of what does Brexit really mean? And it took 4 years. So the decision, the referendum, which was an advisory referendum, took about 3 months, maybe 4 months from beginning to end. And then, you know, the fine line on stay or go was decided on a sort of knife edge.
Just
It's taken a little bit over 4 years to then reach the finality of it. And now what's coming out is the real implication. So it's sort of one of those things where the debate was only aired after the decision was made, which is a bit crazy. And now I'm looking at, in some respects, at the US and the US elections, and Trump and all his ramifications of, you know, I was robbed, it's a fake election, blah, 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 blah. And looking at the storming of the Capitol, you then start going, gosh. And then right now, in the middle of the pandemic, we seem to have arguments between countries of you've got our vaccines, and we live in a global supply chain. And so, you know, if the vaccine is made in Belgium, filled in France, and then delivered in the UK, who's got control? Which country wants to say, I have owned it? It's extraordinary how these debates, well, not debates, the points of view are really influencing people. So in our country, the pandemic is referred to as the South African variant or the Kent variant. And people are scratching names and calling it this. So I'm quite intrigued because, you know, we're a country of 65 million people in an economic related continent, which we can't overcome. You know, we're an island on the edge of a mainland continent. We share the same shelf of 400 million people, and you are in a country of 2.3 billion people. So you must look at this and go, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, no. Yeah, it's actually 1.3 billion people. But then, yes, no. Yeah, I do believe that a lot of the decisions are really, really messy. And in terms of vaccine diplomacy, I think India is doing a good job. Justin, we've actually supplied to Brazil. I think there's some part that's even gone to a few countries in the Middle East. And actually, the PM actually tweeted about sending it to Canada and New Zealand. So we're doing really well in the vaccine diplomacy aspect. I'm actually quite happy and optimistic to see that. But there are a lot of people in India who are actually not going to take the vaccine, not because they're anti-vaxxers or don't believe in vaccination, but in terms of the longevity, I think perhaps it provides a 3-month period, and we're more of, you know, we really want to see how it responds to everyone else, because I think there was a case in one of the Norwegian countries where a lot of people who got vaccinated also ended up dying. So we're just kind of, you know, waiting it out there. And I think, of course, my turn, it's going to take a while. But there are some people who are optimistic about it in terms of the, you know, how effective it is. And there are, of course, the others who don't want to take it because of, you know, quality control. And I think, yeah, these things take time. There needs to be a little more history behind it.
And what are people using as their evidence?
Yes, many of them would need some evidence to see how effective it is. Yes, and also India, I think there needs to be some scientific study done here. So since you're 1.3 billion people, the level at which we really expect the vaccine, or rather the infection, to blow out of proportion here is quite startling, because we have a 1% infection rate. I think 1% of the pop. So we have around 150,000 people who died in a country of 1.3 billion people. And even if you want to add a 5% or a 10% to the perhaps, error rate, or when it comes to misreporting, that's still a smaller number compared to, a 400 million country like the UK. So yeah, it's quite bizarre as to how well we've perhaps, I wouldn't say in terms of responses. I mean, yes, there is a lot of relief packages that have gone out, but in terms of the number of deaths, it's pretty startling to me, at least.
Hmm.
Who else? Can we have Johan? Johan, if you can hear us, you do like to go next. What are your thoughts on big tech?
I would love to hear Johan, but I think he's in a cap and he's basically in passive mode, and it's hard for him to interact with us.
What about Nicole? No?
Nicole is with her son, so she said that she's on radio because she has to look after her son. So it's the three of us.
Yeah. Totally understand. So yeah, actually go ahead. Someone will say
Sorry,
something.
I think you raised an interesting point, though, or several of us have raised interesting points around, what a lot of it comes down to where you get quality information from. And perhaps if you're used to researching and, have a good internet access, and maybe have an education that allows you to find the facts more easily, then that's one thing. But if you're like the mass of the sort of general population, getting their inverted commas facts from maybe dubious sources, and I think at the crux of it, that's clearly for me at least an issue that sort of is at the crux of this. Where do people get information from? And it's not just tech, it's talking about vaccines, it's sort of everything. And I think that's quite a fundamental point. And I don't know how you see that going forward.
That's actually a fair argument. Oh, definitely, that's definitely a fair argument. Actually, for me, according to me, I mean, I'm perhaps more I actually don't believe in any of the news sources. I always try to kind of verify by perhaps. So I think this is a very good example that I actually saw during COVID, and this was live. A friend of mine runs a fact checker in Sri Lanka, and he had warned me that there were a lot of cases that he saw, and this was from a southern. I think it said South China Morning Post, SCMP. So they are a publication in South Korea. And they did see a few cases of transmission from a man to an animal. And this was quite startling because there are so many dog lovers and all of them are so close, and with the whole isolation aspect of things. I actually shared that in a couple of groups, and many of them said that I'm misleading people and I'm fake information. And then what my friend basically did was, in order to fact check that, he called the sources and the reports, and he actually got a report from the hospital which actually certified that yes, this particular animal has coronavirus. And 3 weeks later, the World Economic Forum comes out with an article about all the animal transmissions that have happened. And I shared that back in the group, and everyone said that we wish we knew this earlier because we've also had cases of animals getting it. So, and it sometimes is word of mouth. A lot of, I think you personally need to have agency to verify your information. So, and the best news channels have got it wrong. And most of them also have agendas. You need to realize that many of them are biased. Let's be honest. Like, yes, we have our personal leanings, and then a lot of news channels have their own leanings. And of course, they're also, as you said, decisions are also mucky. So you do have people who will intentionally side with that. Nobody really cares about giving you actual information. Everybody cares about managing their own TRPs. Go ahead, Marcus.
I'm now reminding myself of and I can't remember who the TED talk was from, but it was effectively saying, rather than expecting everything to be free, and then arguing, well, why is it that search engines are not giving us the truth, but are being affected by those advertisers who make it free? We should pay for search, and we should pay to be on the likes of Facebook and LinkedIn. We should pay, and therefore there'd be a contract with us. Yeah, Jaron. So actually, by paying, the contract between us then becomes, don't give us any bias. What's your, maybe that's an interesting way to remove the bias which automatically occurs if things are given to you ostensibly for nothing, because of course there's a price. What's your view on that?
No, I agree with him. I mean, in order for, I mean, and I'm somebody who is pro market. So for example, although yes, I do work in the nonprofit space, but at the end of the day, we all need to survive and we all need to break bread at home. I definitely agree that there are some services that do, and I think everyone should read the privacy policies of these things. And I also think that everyone who's on this call, if you all are from Europe or even if you're from the UK, the GDPR compliances are pretty strong enough to actually safeguard your individual rights, especially in the digital realm, especially if you write a complaint and if you're in touch with the data protection officer, and you can demand from these companies, because these companies are heavily fined. And they really don't care, because Facebook and Google and most of them have had significant blunders when it comes to complying to it, but they don't really care. My take is also that I think you can also be aware, because there is an open source community that also respects everyone's privacy and does not follow the model of providing you with more data. And I could actually give you a few suggestions. For example, I use Brave. I've logged in here through Brave, and Brave blocks all my advertisements. I use DuckDuckGo for my search. It's not personalized. I can share links. I'm happy to share links.
Yeah, DuckDuckGo is good.
DuckDuckGo is great, actually. But then I also take the advantage. So the Google search is nothing but an amplified version of AI. And AI is a very pointed. So AI is all about precision, because the more data you get, the more accurate your results are. So Google is perhaps 20 years of constant, replication and feeding in so that you can get the best searches. So if I want to do research and if I really want to know about a product, I will use Google to find it out. And of course, it's a lot harder if you have an Android phone. But I've been good with Brave, and of course, everyone has heard about what happened with WhatsApp and everyone flying and going away to Signal. So Signal is also a great place. Although WhatsApp is perhaps PGP encrypted, but what happens is that it leaves a lot of metadata, and that metadata has enough information. If you're really particular, it talks about your location, it talks about the message that you send to someone, and that's something. So Signal even encrypts that. Then there's also Threema, which is again a paid subscription, which is supposed to be slightly better than Signal. It also does a comparative analysis, and it's a Swiss company. Proton Mail is Swiss, and Mozilla just came out with their own VPN. So I definitely believe that subscription models is a good way to go. And if it is, and that's how WhatsApp started as well, right? WhatsApp took $1 US from us until Facebook really bought them. So I definitely think that paying is a better contract than you being the product. But then there are a lot of other open source communities that do provide free services. But then at the end of the day, if you really want to be sustainable and grow and stay relevant for the next 25 years, it's good to have a subscription model and a community that you can cater to.
Yeah, thank you.
I think Johan can speak now. He's
Yes, I'm sorry, we were in a taxi, and here it's very interesting that you book an Uber and they just cannot follow the directions. So somehow they don't manage to read the map, and you always need to be there to tell them where to go. And it's really annoying, and I don't understand really why they cannot just follow on the map, the direction that the Uber app is providing them. So yes, I reached this sort of restaurant. So here I'm really happy to be able, to interact. But I was really listening, and I really like this discussion about, in a way, it's about the future of social platforms, right? I mean, it's always this debate now for years, subscription, free model, like the platform is free for everyone, and then the data, you pay with your data, or to implement this model where you pay monthly or yearly a certain amount of money, and then and here it's the point where I don't know how these platforms can make sure that they still will not, give your data to third parties. You cannot control. Another thing that I think, that this model will never be implemented by Facebook, the giants. We are talking here about these giant platforms. If you look at Mark Zuckerberg's yearly update on the earnings of Facebook, it's always about the numbers. That like we now have plus 1 billion, plus 100 million. If you implement any kind of subscription, I think a huge number of users will not be able to pay it. I mean, countries, like I see here, the level of poverty in Egypt is just gigantic. One person out of three is living under the poverty level. And in that case, any extra spending, I guess, will be a huge impact on these people. So they will lose a huge percentage of users. So that's why I think that, given the fact that the main objective of these platforms is to continue growing, right? Growing. And this model will not really work. But I also see a very positive trend. So, in France last year, there was this huge movement from the civil society. It was called the Affaire du siècle. So the kind of a deal of the century, where they spoke out about, the French government not doing enough for climate change. So they sued the French government, and then the French government was so they won, and this was last week that the result came out. That and actually, what's interesting that in this kind of movement, a huge number of actors, so very famous French actors, media people participated. So it was really something big, and this forced, the French government is convicted, and now they have to implement some climate change things, and the same happened in the Netherlands. So I think that public pressure has a huge impact also on these social platforms to make, more transparent how the data is used. Because the key point is this: you need, as a user, to know what is happening with your data, and you need to be able to be in control. So, to decide, do I want that my data is given, I don't know, to Google or to any kind of third-party entity? So that's a bit my point. Now, on a third point I wanted to make is I also follow Nikki's approach. I think much more people are with good intentions than with bad intentions. I'm a very strong user of social media, and I know that my data is everywhere in the world. I post a lot, I share a lot, but nothing bad ever happened to me. So really, I'm of course getting advertisement, but nothing uh, when I would feel myself really in danger, or some personal data that would, reach some people who can do something bad. Nothing ever happened. So that's a bit my overall input, on this topic.
Great. I'll actually start with the Uber topic that you had. Actually, my organization, one of the folks that I consult with, they actually did a small study with Uber in Egypt. And one of the reasons why the drivers really perhaps can't understand it is that it was, as you said, Egypt is a poor country. So it was just translation. The Google translation wasn't enough. And that's why a lot of people left, a lot of drivers have left Uber. And a lot of drivers keep leaving Uber because it's not accurate. The GPS is not accurate, and there is a massive translation and localization problem with Uber in Egypt. So that's a
I
little
get
bit
it.
about
Okay.
why we have Uber issues. Coming to the issues of, uh, you know, someone not harming you. I think you mentioned about how subscription models can also be harmful. Yes, there was a popular app called Flow, which is for tracking a woman's menstrual cycle, and they actually lied to their consumers about not using their data, but they sell it. This has also happened in Tinder, where Tinder also gave their data to a third party and targeted advertisements. And of course, we all know that Tinder also has a paid subscription. So it all boils down to how we
Yes.
understand and how we interpret policies. And most company policies are intentionally long so that we as consumers don't read them. But the beauty is that if you are a European citizen, you can actually ask for the places where your data has gone and intentionally delete it. That includes Facebook or a Twitter or a LinkedIn. So if
Good.
you are a European citizen, you really do have the matter in your hands. You'll be fine. You just need to contact your data protection officer. I could also help you with that if that's something you're interested in, and I could send you a template of what you want to write to them. And yeah, I mean, you should be fine. It's not going to be terrible. But when it comes to harming you, I think there are a lot of cases that happen where you don't know how it harms you, because there are people who can intentionally harm you and not harm you, and then I mean, it's more like, it's more like whether you want someone to really see the intimate conversations that you're having. And, but if it comes to uh, a company judging my social media presence to give me a job or to deny it. So, yeah, I think those things I don't believe should go hand in
Coming
hand.
coming back to this, one thing that scared me, but I still think that that person was joking with me. So I had this friend who was working for Facebook, and I asked, like, very honestly, tell me. I mean, we were very good friends. Do you have access if you wanted? Could you read my message, my private messages? And interestingly, he said he avoided the reply. Like he didn't want to reply. So I hope that they cannot, but you never know. And that's why I think the whole kind of point here is that we need to be very vigilant. We need to really understand what are the tools we can use, to kind of um, democratize the way these platforms behave, because they cannot be this kind of authority which kind of controls your data. We control our data, and we should be the ones who, in case there is like something going wrong, are able to use this toolkit at our disposal to push them in another direction. And that's why a huge thing here is to educate users. We need programs where users really understand the privacy rules, policies, and really, how to say, get that training to read those documents and to understand those policies which govern these platforms. And I see also with my friends here, very often they just don't care. Like I don't really care what is going to happen, and probably, especially here, I'm talking about the children, younger generation who are now growing up with Facebook, right? I mean, I first saw Facebook when I was probably 20. I don't remember exactly, but not sooner. These people, at the age of, I guess, maybe 10, they start using Facebook, even earlier. So they really need this kind of training, I think. But like, what is happening, how the data is going to be used. Maybe you need some animations, you need some sort of easy way to teach these people that this is a big problem.
I totally second to what Johan is saying. I think so. No one in the world knows how to build a radio. So we stop trying to understand technology because we don't, right? But with data, it's not about understanding data. It's about logic. Like, where does the information come from? That if we stick with Tinder, right? The match group. So the company that owns Hinge, Tinder, OkCupid, Plenty of Fish.
You know a lot about this.
They're like 30. They just introduced a service in China where you pay $100 and they promise for the $100 that 6 months later you will marry.
Wow.
600 what? Okay, could you repeat that, the last part?
They introduced a service where you pay $100 and when you start with the system, 6 months later you will have you will marry. You found
Really?
it. So how do you think they
We
would
had
have
a
that
random
information?
we actually had an app here that actually approached that I do partnerships with them. They call Better Half AI, and they say that AI will help you get married, which is
So how do you
hilarious. So
think?
yeah,
How do you think? And it's just I'm not going into that platform, but how do you think they have that information? Right? They only
I
have
don't
that
think they
information
have
because
that.
it's fed into the systems and it's sourced from algorithms to match your future wife or your future husband.
So that's because they have a lot of personally identifiable information. For example, I mean, if you ask me, if I really want to do a good stock of somebody, I can do it. I mean, by the photographs, because I can even search for your photograph. I know where you live. I will also know the whereabouts through the stuff that you do on Instagram, and I can find out about your date of birth. So that could also give me access to your bank details. Perhaps in India, it's very simple because all bank usernames start with your first name, the first 4 syllables of your name, along with your date of birth. So there you go. You can get to know about a life update, whether you're married or who you're not married to. And then if you work somewhere, I mean, LinkedIn is everything. You can really figure things out there as well. So I don't think it's that difficult if you really want to find out about someone. And if you're
Raashi,
like, you can even find out without a Facebook account.
I feel like this is a conversation we could have for hours, and I really enjoy this. We've hit the top of the hour, and thank you so much. I enjoyed the way you ran that time together. It was a good conversation. I think now and then we have to force ourselves to go back to think about what's happening with the information that we so generously share with the systems. Just kind of go bring it back to our consciousness, what's happening and what's the good and the bad. I've enjoyed the session so much. Thank you so much for taking time. That was really wonderful.
Yeah.